Hello and welcome everybody to this Twitter space. I hope you can hear me well, and I'm very glad to see that quite a few people have joined already. So let's start with some short introductions for what will be happening today. My name is Nadia. For those who don't know me, I'm a full stack software engineer. I currently live and work in London. I actually work at a company called Intercom. So in my day-to-day work, I focus on building chatbots and other kinds of automation. I'm actually a self-taught engineer. So in my previous career, in my previous life, I used to be a journalist, and then I taught myself to code and found a job as a software engineer. So today I am joined by a Twitter star, somebody who you have probably seen on tech Twitter, Anna McDougall, who is also actually a career switcher like I am, and also somebody who has talked quite a lot about the topic of juniors kind of being promoted from junior to mid-level. And Anna, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Firstly, Nadia, I want to give complete and utter credit to Nadia. It was her idea to do this. She organized it, she planned it, she scheduled it. So even though I'm officially the co-host, she really needs to have all of the credit. I just kind of turned up. I also want to apologize in advance because I'm a bit sick. So you might hear me sniffling, maybe I cough from time to time. I apologize for that terrible, terrible sound that will come into your ears, but I'm going to do my best. So yes, a bit about me. As you can maybe hear from my accent, I'm Australian. I live in Germany. I am best known, I guess, for being a former opera singer turned software engineer. And I now work as director of product and engineering for Axel Springer National Media and Tech. They're like the tech branch for Germany's largest print media brand. So we do everything from AI, machine learning, data science, data engineering. We have an innovation team. We have websites, of course, apps team, a bit of everything. So yeah, I am one of the directors there. So I've actually also overseen quite a few promotion hearings. So when people come in and say, yes, we want a promotion, then we as directors have to approve that promotion. And yeah, so I've been part of those talks. I also, when I was a software engineer myself, I also got promoted. Let me think about it. I started in March and I got my promotion in September. So I think it only took me about 6 months to get promoted in that situation. And I don't think that's because I'm like a 10x developer. I think it's because I did lots of things right that hopefully we can talk about today. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here. And thank you again, Nadia, for the organizational labor.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. I think it's pretty impressive that you made this kind of transition from being a junior to not being a junior so quickly. And overall, I think that in tech Twitter and overall in the tech space, we talk quite a lot about the what it takes for somebody who is non-technical to learn to code and then get a junior developer job. But I don't think we talk quite enough about what happens afterwards. So once you get hired, once you become a software engineer, junior software engineer, what happens next? I think that there is kind of not enough resources on this topic afterwards. And this is a similar topic, I think, to how there is so much resources on how to learn to code from zero to basics, and then there is not enough resources when it comes to the intermediate level. So this space, this Twitter space, I hope will kind of fill this void or space in the information about career and career development for junior developers. So to start with, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we think of who a junior developer is and what defines a junior developer. I think that overall this is very much dependent on the company, and each company defines this in their own way. So I've seen companies where a junior developer is basically somebody who is kind of doesn't really know how to do anything, and then and needs hand holding kind of on every step that they take. But then there are companies where junior developer is a pretty much an independent developer who has very strong technical skills, but maybe is missing some organizational or communication skills or leadership or something like that. So this is obviously depends quite a lot on the company and on the engineering structure. But I think that still there are things that we can talk about what defines a junior developer and what makes a junior developer different from a mid-level developer. So in my opinion, I think that the defining characteristic of a junior developer is definitely the lack of autonomy. So a junior developer is somebody who needs more guidance, more help, is somebody who's a little bit scared of making decisions when it comes to technology, product decisions, and things like that. So this is somebody who is lacking a little bit of a confidence, I think. And then, of course, this is somebody who is lacking technical skills. But for me, I think the kind of the most defining characteristic is definitely this fear that juniors have for making decisions and for taking ownership of the tasks that they are doing. What is, in your opinion, Anna, kind of when you think of a junior, what do you think about?
Yeah, so before I begin, I just wanted to agree with what you said earlier about the gap in information. So anyone who follows me knows that I've published a book all about changing careers into tech, and that's very much like I guess as you have too, and it's very much focusing on that transition from nothing to junior developer. So I've thought a lot like about okay, what do people need to do to get to a junior developer level? And actually, it's really your timing with this topic is really good because one of the things I'm working on right now at National Media and Tech is actually to do what's called a tech expert track. And that is basically like a career ladder for people who don't want leadership. So they're just interested in programming and technical skills and to create kind of a career path for them because that's something that's lacking in a lot of companies. You know, a lot of companies assume that the more experience you get, the more you're going to want to lead people, but that's not actually always what happens. So I've been thinking a lot and I've been writing a lot internally at my company about what a junior is and what we expect a junior to do before they become a mid-level or what at what point can we promote them to mid-level. And I think you're right about like to me what you said is kind of like the things that juniors are often lacking, like they're often lacking some sort of technical ability, they're often lacking some sort of confidence or in making technical decisions, or they're lacking that sense of responsibility over their work, or ownership maybe is a better term than responsibility. But I think one thing that I really want to focus on that I think is good about juniors, something that I really like about juniors, and that I think is the role of a junior. So what is the role of a junior? The role of a junior in my mind is to learn as much as possible and to lean on their team. So, you know, we can say a lack of confidence, and that makes it sound like a bad thing. But I also want to say, like, it's a good thing if you don't have that confidence. It's a good thing to go out and look for that from other people. And what I look for in a good junior, what defines a good junior to me, is someone who, like, I always know where they stand. Like, I always know if they're struggling with something, I know that they're struggling. And if they are good with something, I know that they're good with something, and I can trust them when they say that. The worst type of junior, in my opinion, is someone who says, "Oh yeah, that's great," when they're given a ticket, and then you don't hear from them for like a week, and then when you check in with them, you see that like nothing has been done or very little has been done, and you find out that they've been stuck since like the first day. That's a worst case scenario, I think, for a team. So yeah, for me, a junior should be someone who, even if they are struggling, they are willing to communicate that they are struggling and take ownership of that and actually really do their best not only to learn by themselves, but to utilize their team to get better. Because I think a lot of juniors, as you say, that they lack confidence. And so they go in thinking like, oh, I suck at this. I don't want anyone to know that I suck at this. They're going to fire me. And I think what I would advise any junior listening to this to do is to absolutely resist and go in the opposite direction with your thoughts. If you don't know what's going on, the best thing you can do is to say, I don't actually understand this. Can you help me? Can someone explain this to me? Or I've gone and I've read the documentation, but it's still not clear to me how XYZ works. For example, when I started as a junior, I had I had done a lot of documentation. I'd read a lot of documentation about Docker. I'd even Dockerized a Node, a Node application. That's the word I'm looking for. A Node application, but I really didn't get it. Like I kind of just followed the steps, and I didn't really understand the broader scheme. Like, why is Docker important, or like what is its purpose here? Like, why would I do this? I didn't understand that, and it was only because I really kept asking questions and kept insisting that someone tell me that I found out. And then it was much easier for me to help other juniors and kind of pass that knowledge along. So in terms of what is the role of a junior? I mean, for me, I don't expect a junior to have a high level of technical ability or a high level of technical confidence, but I do expect them to be able to communicate what they're confident with and what they're not confident with. And I would like regular communication on that. And I suppose to feel like they're not ashamed when they don't know something, because you see the best developers, the best senior developers are people who say, I don't know, the moment they don't know something. And that's a great habit to get, I think, for juniors as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the communication aspect is very important. I think that the lack of confidence that we both mentioned, it sometimes comes from the fact that a lot of junior developers are actually very, very scared. And when I was a junior developer, when I got my first developer job, I remember that the defining feeling, beside being overwhelmed and like not knowing how to do anything, but was just this fear, this constant fear of being found out and being fired and not being good enough. So I think that a lot of junior developers, career switchers, especially those who spend a lot of time trying to get into the space, they have this overwhelming fear of losing their job, of being seen as, this imposter syndrome is very real for everybody, but for career switchers especially so. So I think that this ability, this vulnerability, and this ability to admit publicly that you don't know something, it's something that is very hard to do for people who make the switch into coding, especially later in life, especially if you have had a career before that where you were successful, maybe where you were an expert and where you knew everything, and then you go into this new space, into the tech world, where suddenly you don't know anything. So for me, when I started working as a developer, I found that I didn't know even the basic words that my colleagues were using. So as you mentioned Docker, I remember people like mentioning this word around me, and like other things like a compiler, a shell, or something like that, and I had no idea what those words mean. So for me, it was important to admit that, okay, maybe I'm, the worst programmer right now, but if I start asking questions and if I choose to learn from others, this will help me grow. So I think that this is a mindset that all good developers should adopt, and this is something that will actually help them progress in their career. And in terms of kind of making this switch from being a junior to being a mid-level developer, I think that this ability to start making your own decisions after you have gathered all of the information that you need is something that is very crucial. I think the lack of confidence that you have because you don't have much experience might lead to you being unable to make decisions because you are new, you don't have the experience, you don't know, you don't have the knowledge, and you might think that actually you are not in a position to make decisions. However, I think that unless you start making decisions, it will be very difficult for you to stop being a junior, or maybe even impossible. So you will never feel completely ready. So you kind of need to start small. And I think that this is like the first advice that I would give to anybody who is already a junior, but who wants to become a mid-level developer in the near future. So you kind of need, yeah.
Sorry, I just want to interrupt you quickly because something you said there really resonates with me. It's something I speak about in my book as well, and which is, of course, imposter syndrome. I feel like you can't write a book about programming without like mentioning imposter syndrome somewhere. So yeah, I mean, it's something that I definitely mention. I feel very strongly about this, that when you feel that sense of imposter syndrome, which like really, let's face it, everyone has at some point, if not with programming, then with some part of their life. But to me, it is absolutely essential that you view that as a learning opportunity. So every time that I've felt that sense of imposter syndrome, it's occurred to me, okay, why am I feeling so uncomfortable? Okay, because I don't know what a shell is, all right, whatever it is. I don't know what a shell is. Okay, I'm out of my depth. The conversation has kept going, and I still have no idea what everyone else in my group is talking about or everyone in my team is talking about. What do I do? Like, I feel like an idiot. They're going to find me out, blah, blah, blah. But when I'm feeling that way, okay, here's what most people say. They'll say, "Oh, no, 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 everyone feels that way. It's okay. Like everyone has these moments. You're not the worst one there. I'm sure it's fine." Okay, but what if you are the worst one there? You just said, Nadia, and I absolutely believe this. Sometimes you are the worst programmer in the room, and that's okay. You know, like that's fine. But the difference is how you deal with that feeling. If you're going to go in there and be like, "Oh, I'm the worst one in the room, therefore I should just give up," well, yeah, you're always going to be the worst one in the room if you're going to feel that way. If you go in there and you think, okay, I'm the worst one in the room, hang on, that means I have a room full of people who can make me better. That is an awesome learning opportunity. And so for me, that's the difference, is whether you see this team, or you see these communication opportunities with your team. Do you view those as a learning opportunity, or do you view it as you trying to prove yourself, as you trying to like hold yourself to some sort of standard that only really exists in your head, right? So I think it's really important that you go into those scenarios viewing it as a learning opportunity, because if you do, and if you really take every opportunity that comes to you, you will find that your technical skills evolve so much faster than if you just sit there feeling terrible about yourself. And it's really, to me, it's a huge key part for juniors trying to develop their skills, trying to get to mid-level. Um, it's of course, the key part of that, or a key part of that, is developing technical skill. But I think that the social skills that you develop help you to achieve that goal. So if you can develop the social skills of admitting when you don't know something, of being collaborative, of inviting people to pair program with you, of helping other people when they don't know something, other juniors, or maybe you're like amazing at JavaScript and your project is actually in Java, but then randomly some piece of JavaScript emerges, I don't know, and then you can actually help a senior who has no JavaScript experience. These situations happen where juniors actually know more than seniors. And when they happen, do you take that opportunity to teach? Those kind of social skills, they actually help your technical skills develop a lot faster. And as I said before, when I got promoted from junior to mid-level, for me, it wasn't because I'm like some amazing programming genius. Like I think I'm probably like above average, but like I don't think I was amazing. I think the difference is that I just took every single opportunity to learn. And that meant that I got to know a lot of people in the company. They got to know me. They got to see what I could do. So they could see, okay, Anna knows her shit, if you can excuse my French. She knows what she's doing when she says she knows what she's doing. And when she doesn't, she tells me. And I know how to help her. And that meant that I was able to learn really quickly. When people said stuff to me that I didn't understand, I would say to them, hey, stop, like, just stop for a second. Can you just go back a few steps? Because I was with you until this point, and then you lost me when you said shell, or you lost me when you said Docker. What does that mean? And I would just literally stop them from talking, which I know sounds rude, but everyone's been there where they don't understand what's going on. So most people were really receptive to that kind of honesty. And I still do that. Like I'm at the director level now, and I love my work, but I'm new. I've never been at this level before. And so I often say to people, I'm like, look, I don't know how to navigate this, or I don't know what's expected of me. I don't know how to put this together. Or if they're talking about profit loss statements, for example, I don't have that kind of business background yet. So when they're talking about this stuff, I need to kind of stop them and say, hang on, what does that acronym mean? So these are skills that like you should be using from day one of your programming job, and they will help you develop in every single sense. And I think that's something that a lot of juniors underestimate. They view social skills, or what people call soft skills, but I don't call them that. But social skills and communication skills, they think that those are completely separate from technical skills, and it's just not the case. You need those skills. You need the social and communication skills to really develop as quickly as possible technically. And similarly, if you can't develop technical skills, you're going to have a hard time communicating with your team. So the two kind of go hand in hand. You can't view them as completely different, separate entities. Obviously, you might be stronger at one than at another. That's fine. But you really need to be working on both. And when you do, you will find that they work really nicely together. So that's my little rant.
I really love what you said there about the importance of also starting to share your own knowledge. I think this is the moment when you kind of start moving from being a junior to being a mid-level developer. When you're a junior, you might feel that you don't know anything at all, and like you don't know anything that is worth sharing because you are maybe the only junior on your team. But I think that in reality, a lot of developers, even junior ones, they actually have things that they know and understand better than other people on their team. Maybe because even if you just joined the team, maybe you have spent a lot of time analyzing some part of the code base. Maybe, as Anna said, you have experience working with JavaScript in your previous job, and then suddenly a senior developer who has always been a backend developer has a question about it. So I think that there is always this kind of feeling that you are junior, so you don't really have anything to share. But in reality, you might be the most knowledgeable person on a certain topic in your team. So in my experience, I've had this when I was a junior. I actually wanted to start sharing knowledge, but I felt that I didn't have anything to share, especially with my more senior colleagues. A lot of them had master's degree in computer science from top universities, and it was very intimidating for me because like, what can I share with them? Is there anything that I know that they don't? And I found a topic about it was actually about the object-oriented design patterns, and this was a topic that I actually didn't know much about, or maybe anything. So what I did, I actually just did a deep study session of those principles. I prepared a presentation on them and I presented it to my colleagues. And what I found out is that actually it was very interesting for them to attend. Some of them who already studied this stuff in college, they were very happy to be reminded of those patterns because things like that are not something that you think about on a day-to-day basis, but still this is something very useful. So they appreciated it, and I was able to share something despite being a junior. So I think that this is kind of a transformative moment for any junior when you realize that you actually can teach something as well. And sharing your knowledge is something that allows you to expand your influence on your team and kind of grow your influence in the team and maybe the whole organization. So basically, this is something that can help you go from being somebody who needs help to somebody who can help as well.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to remember, and this is another piece of advice that I often give with regards to imposter syndrome. Um, excuse me. For those just joining, I have like a sinus infection, so I'm struggling a little bit here, but I'm gonna get through the hour. So the other thing to remember is that with imposter syndrome is that the world of tech is enormous, right? Like I don't think I like. I mean, I'm I'm directing like several. Like I'm aware of lots of different projects inside my organization, and to me, it seems like a lot. But it's scratching the surface of what kind of tech exists. Like the number of niches you can go into, and then within those niches, more niches like specific frameworks or specific tools that you can become an expert in. These are you can just keep going. Like tech is so huge. And this is why it's so important to admit when you don't know something, because anyone who is at the level of senior or principal, they know this. So they are so happy to admit when they don't know something, because what they want is that someone on another team or on their own team knows that information and can share it with them quickly and easily. So you might feel like, oh, I have this knowledge. Everyone knows about CSS Flexbox, but for example, but you'll find there are plenty of full stack engineers or back-end engineers specifically who get some front-end tickets and are feeling completely lost because they're like, I don't get it. Like I've put justify content center on this flex column and it's not like centering everything. So what's going on? So there are things like this, and if you don't know what that means, that's totally fine, by the way. But I'm just using it as an example of something that to me would seem very obvious as someone who trained Flexbox years ago. But to other people might seem like, well, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Why would that happen? So there are always opportunities to share knowledge, and sharing knowledge is it's important in every field, but it's especially important in tech simply because it is such an enormous field. You cannot know everything, and you will not ever know everything. So we rely on each other to share that knowledge. And so if you, as Nadia did, you can find a topic that your team needs to explore and people don't have a lot of experience in, and you go and you spend a few hours researching it, and then you put together a presentation and you share that with your team. That is a very powerful thing to do, because not only do you learn something, not only does the rest of the team learn it, so they don't have to spend hours researching it, so you're saving them time, but people also then get to know, oh, hey, Nadia, she knows her shit. Like she's good at this. Like if I have a question about this, I can go to her. And even if she doesn't know the answer, we can troubleshoot this problem together. And that means it kind of gets you a good reputation as a junior. So that's an excellent thing to do, Nadia. I mean, I did similar things. Like we had an internal conference, like an internal, not hackathon, like an internal. Well, I mean, we did have an internal hackathon actually, and for that one, I volunteered for a topic, and it was like pure front end, like just one question that we needed to solve for a not for profit that we were helping, and then I gave a presentation about it to the entire company. And it was not like the most amazing advanced technological concept ever. But what I showed is that I knew how to work a technical subject, I had done technical research, and that I could then speak about this technical stuff to share that knowledge with others. And that's very, very powerful. So I think, like, yeah, that's one very concrete strategy that I can really recommend from Nadia and my experience, Nadia's and my experience, I think that's right, that is a good strategy to use if you are looking for a promotion to mid-level, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So before we share more tips for you to get promoted to mid-level, I wanted to say that I should have said this in the beginning, but we'll be opening the floor to for questions. So I think in about 5 or so minutes. So if you have any questions about getting promoted from junior level to mid-level, please request to speak, or you can also ask your question on Twitter in the Twitter thread. So if you have any questions, please prepare them and start asking them so that we both get a chance to answer them. So on the point of kind of showing initiative and in sharing knowledge, so other examples of things that I've done to be promoted to mid-level, I organized a book club at work where we were reading books both on technical topics and also on non-technical topics. And then I also organized a study group where we were working through a book produced by Google, which is the SRE book, so the Site Reliability Engineering book, kind of their famous Bible on SRE. So all of those things I was organizing because I wanted to learn together with other people. I wanted to build a community inside of my company, but also all of those things were examples of things that I could then use in my promotion document, in my application for a promotion. So I think this is a good moment to start talking about like concrete steps that somebody might take in order to become promoted, and how you can start preparing for your upcoming promotion today if you are still a junior. So I think that like the meta tip here is to understand that being promoted and kind of all of this stuff about promotions, it might seem a little bit dirty to you, like you don't like to talk about money and stuff. However, I think that it's important to realize that this is sort of a game that we all play when we are working for companies, especially larger companies. And in order to be promoted, you kind of need to understand how to play the game. So you need to understand what the engineering levels are, what the expectations are, what people at junior level do, what people at mid level do, what people at senior level do, and also you need to understand where you are on this level, and also what you need to do to reach a higher level. I think that the mistake that some people make is that they kind of focus very deeply on the urgent things. So if you think of the Eisenhower matrix, there is a stuff that is urgent and important, and then like urgent and not important. And people focus on the urgent and not that important stuff, so like day-to-day work, but they don't really focus on the long-term perspective of their career growth at the company. And I think that this is very important to keep in mind, even if you're just starting out, maybe like not on your first week, but definitely within your first few months in the company. I think this is something very important to keep in mind. I know, Anna, you have written quite a lot about getting a promotion as a junior. Maybe you would like to share something as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're 100% correct. I feel like the biggest mistake I see is usually people who they just enter the job and then they just work the job, and then they kind of wonder why no one's offered them a promotion. Like they kind of, they just kind of do their stuff for like a year or two, and then they're like, oh, no one's asked me if I want a promotion yet. And I think what's really important to remember is that like companies look after companies, right? Like if you're lucky, you have a team lead or a manager who really cares about your development and really takes an interest in that. But the majority of the time, if a company doesn't know, or your manager or team lead doesn't know that you want a promotion, they're not just going to offer it to you out of the blue. You have to really show that you've taken that initiative and that you're interested in that. So I wrote a thread on this a while ago. I'll try to find it and post it in comments a bit later. But basically, the idea is this: when you know that you're about 6 to 12 months out from wanting a promotion, you talk to your team lead and you say, "Hey, I just want you to know I'm really interested in moving up to mid-level. Um, I By this point you should already have done what Nadia said. You should have done your research. So you should already know most companies have a career ladder or career matrix or something that kind of shows what they expect at different levels. Um, so hopefully you have something like that in your company and you can find it on your intranet. Usually it's easily available because it's obviously a question lots of people have. Um, so you should say, hey, I've read this. I think I'm, 6 to 12 months out from meeting this criteria. What do you think? Like, where do you think, like, what things do you think I need to work on? And you should ask that question directly to your manager and team lead and come up with a plan. So they might say, oh, well, I've noticed that your back end skills are really good, but when it comes to front end tickets, you still need a lot of help and a lot of clarification on basics. So I guess I would expect you to be more across, the core functionality of JavaScript and CSS by the time like you got promoted. Or they might say, "Oh, your technical skills are great, but I noticed that in meetings you never say anything, and I don't get the feeling that you're really helping the other team members." So in that case, you could come up with a plan that you mentor someone else in the team, or you could take note of this and just try to speak up more in meetings, or something along those lines, something that you can measure and keep track of. So you want to come up with like some solid goals, like 2 to 3, I think is really strong, like main goals. And then obviously you've got to do those things. That's really key. That's where the work comes in. You're not just gonna magically um, do those things unless you make a solid effort. So it's really good to make that effort, of course. And then the key part that I think a lot of people miss is to then also record what you have done. So write down, I like to keep like a Google Doc, but it can be whatever you want, to actually keep track of what you've done and keep track of what you've contributed that meets those goals. So, for example, if they say, oh, I want you to get more involved in the developer community, and you start a book club like Nadia did, or you give a presentation, or you do an internal hackathon, then you should be writing down, like, completed this hackathon, this date, this is the work I did for it, these are the people I worked with. And here's the part that most people miss. After these events are done, or after you've done these things, you should be contacting the people who you have just done that stuff with and said, hey, Jane, just so you know, I'm going for a promotion later in the year. I was wondering if you'd give me a few sentences about our work together that I could use when I apply for the promotion. And 9 times out of 10, people will actually send you some really nice stuff. And it's really nice to read when people compliment you. So I mean, it's good for you anyway. But it's very strong when it comes to actually then going for the promotion, when the promotion hearing happens. So when you get to the point where you're actually going for it, then you actually have this huge body of evidence. Then if everyone you've worked with in the last 6 to 12 months has 2 to 3 lovely sentences to say about you, and you can put that in front of your manager or your team lead, it is very hard for them to ignore that kind of body of evidence, and very hard for them to say, oh no, I don't think you've earned it. Do you know what I mean? So for me, I put together the structure at my company was a bit different. They only did promotions at one time of the year, which was September. So I had to go for my promotion in September, or else I would have to wait a year. So I went for it then. and they had like a hearing. It sounds so formal, but it was actually quite formal, where you had like 10 minutes with 3 or 4 leaders, developer leaders in the company, and then you had to kind of pitch yourself to them. So I did like a whole presentation and I listed out, okay, here are all the communities of practice that I've been involved in. Here are all the projects I've worked on. Here are the roles I've taken. Here are the people I've mentored. And here is a huge like list of quotes from people you know and respect talking about how awesome I am. And I mean, I really think that at that time, like once you've gone through all of that stuff, oh, and I also said, of course, here's the career matrix, and here are all the criteria that I meet. And here's what I didn't meet 6 months ago. Here's how much I've improved. And it's really hard for people to ignore that kind of evidence. If you just go into a promotional hearing and you're just saying, like, oh, yeah, I think I've done really well and I've completed all the tickets I need to complete. Well, they're like, okay, that's nice, but like, have you done more than the absolute bare minimum that is required of you? So you really need to prepare for those things. You really have to have that information ready to go. I think in an ideal world, yes, your manager or team lead would come to you and say, I want to give you a promotion out of nowhere. And you just be like, oh, okay, great. I guess I'm awesome. But unfortunately, as you said, Nadia, like we've got to play the game a little bit. And part of that game is to pitch yourself, just like in a job interview. And it is a job interview, don't forget. Like when you're going for mid-level, you're saying, hey, I want you to pay me more to do a similar job to what I've already been doing. So please hire me in that new role. So you've also got to overcome that feeling of, oh, I don't like talking about myself. I don't like bragging. You kind of have to put all of that aside and just say, okay, this isn't about bragging. This is about showing evidence. And I think if you can do that, so make a plan with your manager, fulfill the action points, and then prove that you've met those action points and pair it with comments from coworkers talking about how amazing you are, it's going to be very hard for them not to promote you. That's my personal approach anyway to promotions.
Yeah, this is excellent, and this is very similar to the approach that I have been using in my career. I think that a couple of things really speak to me. I think one about keeping a record of the stuff that you have been working on is very important. So the way I call it is like as a brag sheet, or maybe like a feel good folder where you collect all the amazing feedback that you have received about your work. But basically, what you can do, as Anna said, you can start a Google document where you just make a note of everything that you do at work. Maybe you can write what impact this thing had on some metrics in your company, because also, as always with job search and with promotions, it's very good for businesses to show your business that you have actually moved some numbers. With your features that you have shipped, maybe the feature that you shipped increased revenue in some way or attracted new users. If you can get data like that, this is absolutely brilliant. So other things that sounded very relevant to me was also collecting feedback. So as soon as you ship something impressive, or you organize an event, or you do a presentation or anything like that, ask people who were there for feedback. Maybe they can share some thoughts on how you can improve, but also probably they will share some very positive feedback, because most people like to be really nice and they will usually provide positive feedback, at least in writing. So this is something that you can later use as proof that you have actually done it. And I think that the crucial thing here is to remember that companies, as Anna said, they take care of companies, and your boss, like ideally your manager, should be like really invested in your career and should be like working with you day to day on your career growth and promoting you and all of that. But it doesn't always happen. Sometimes managers are kind of hands off and they don't really get involved in this stuff that much, that actively. So you kind of have to drive this yourself. I think that what helps is understanding that this is, especially if a promotion happens only once a year, it's kind of your only chance to get paid more just once a year. So if you miss it, then it will be a whole year of the same salary. I think this can be a good motivation, especially now with the inflation and kind of the whole recession happening all over the world. So this is something that you can think of if you're feeling a little bit uneasy about like doing this thing, because in reality, this is you asking for more money, and a lot of people feel very uncomfortable asking for money, but this is kind of the way this works. And collecting kind of the record of your achievements and how you met specific goals that you have set up with your manager. I think this is very, very crucial. Usually, companies, especially bigger companies, they will have a matrix of certain competencies that you need to meet in order to be promoted, and you need to focus on the competencies that you are still missing, and then kind of focusing on what you can do to meet those competencies. I see we get a request to ask a question. Let me and okay, it disappeared. Okay. I didn't catch your name, so if you still want to ask a question, can you request access again? So in the meantime, I wanted to say that okay, I lost my thought.
That's okay. I can hop in for a second there. That's fine. I do want to say that, like, because that's something that a lot of people don't realize. Because a lot of people think that you need to be a specialist in tech, and I will say that at the earlier stages, especially if you're in a full stack position, you're usually not expected to be an expert. And usually, as Nadia said, normally you're expected actually to get a very broad, basic understanding of many, many different areas. So developing that kind of, if you can imagine the T shape, I don't know if everyone, if you haven't heard of the T-shaped thing, this is a very common management speak for a type of person that a lot of tech companies like to hire, and that is that they've got a broad understanding of a lot of different things. That's the horizontal line. That's the kind of, yeah, the broad basic understanding. And then the T, the vertical line coming down in a capital T, that is representing expertise, right? So you're expected, in general, most senior software engineers plus are expected to be developing that vertical line, that area of expertise where they are really like the go-to person for a particular technology or for a particular tool or for a particular programming language. But when you're starting out, what you should be working on is the horizontal line, that is developing a broad understanding of how software engineering in general works, how programming languages in general work, and how you can do practical things with programming languages. Because a lot of people, of course, sing the praises of computer science degrees, but anyone who has done a computer science degree will also tell you that although it can give you a broad systematic understanding of software engineering, it doesn't necessarily give you a good understanding of how a programming language in particular can implement those kind of systems. So that's the other thing that you can also be developing as a junior. So depending on, if you have, like me, you're a career changer and you've been developing this programmatic skill, then maybe for you, the more important thing is to understand on a more systems level or a more architectural level how software works. And if you're someone who comes from a computer science degree and you have this strong systematic understanding, then developing a broad base of understanding might mean for you going more into a programming language and how do I actually do all this stuff that I learned about at university? How can I actually do that, like with a programming language? So it really depends on what you are lacking, and everyone has different gaps. There's nothing wrong with that, and that's another reason why, for example, juniors can help each other a lot. I had no idea when I started what a UML diagram was, and I was starting with other juniors who knew what a UML diagram was, but had a lot of trouble with algorithms. And so we actually helped each other a lot as juniors because they could help give me that understanding to help fill in that horizontal T, and I could give them help to help them fill in their horizontal T. So I think as a junior, that's what you're really looking to develop, and that's also what you're looking to prove when it comes to getting to mid-level. That yes, I understand broadly what is going on with this software. I understand that it's not just about like creating a button, that there is a lot more going on here, that tests exist, that pipelines exist, that deployment is a thing that happens. These are the kind of stuff that is really important to develop as a junior and then to prove when you go into mid-level. But yeah, I want to also echo what Nadia was saying, that we welcome questions. So if you want to ask a question, you can just volunteer to say like request to speak, or you can pop it into a thread. I think Nadia posted a thread, and then there was also like the little chat. This chat thing at the bottom right is new to me, but I think you can also use that to ask questions. So yeah, please ask us. Otherwise, this will have been a lovely 45 minutes talking to you all. But I'm sure that there's more that we can do for you. So please, yeah, ask us away. Ask away.
Yeah, so you can ask in the chat. So if you're listening to this through your phone, you will see a box on the right, down right. You will see a way to ask a question. So it's basically a Twitter thread as well, or you can write on my profile as well, or just ask to talk. One thing that also popped to mind when I was listening to this is the kind of, we've been talking a lot about soft skills. We've been talking a lot about technical skills that you need to work on to stop being a junior. But also there is something else that I think you need to really understand in order to progress in your career. So you kind of need to understand what your job is. I think that a lot of people who start coding and start working as programmers, they think that their job is just to code like mindlessly. So they receive a feature or like a ticket and they just code it. And this is fine in the beginning, but once you have kind of spent some time in the company and you feel comfortable with the tools and you think that you are able to complete the tickets on time and you're kind of thinking that you're not like drowning all the time, so this is a moment when you can start kind of thinking on a little bit of a higher level, so thinking about the business. So what is your company doing? Like, what is the product that you're selling? What are you building and why you're building this feature? And asking those questions from your leadership, I think that this is this is the next step in your career. Understanding that your job is not to code per se, but your job is to solve problems of your customers, right? So you can start questioning the tickets that you receive, like why do you need to build this feature? What kind of customer problem is it solving? Is there a way to you can make it better? Is there a way you can solve this problem in a more efficient way? And probably not at every company those questions will be welcomed. You can kind of be reasonable and see whether this will fly well or not, because if this is like a toxic company where those kind of things are not acceptable, don't risk your job and don't do it. But if this is like a company with a good culture and people are nice and decent around you, these are the kind of discussions that you might start to have. And this is a process where you start thinking more about the users and the people behind the product and not just about the tools. I think that this is something that it's a very important mind shift, I think, that needs to happen for you to see yourself as somebody who solves problems and not somebody who just codes for the sake of coding. Because sometimes for like, you need to think about the business. The business is paying a lot of money to you as a developer, and they don't want you just to code because like you like coding, so you'll just go and code for a week because you like it. This might be true, but your boss is not paying you to do this just for fun. They're paying you to solve a business problem. So if you discover midway, for instance, through the week that this problem doesn't need to be solved in this way, maybe there is another solution, maybe there is like a workaround that doesn't require you to code at all. I think that this is a moment when you should be open about it and say, okay, I really like coding this stuff, but from the business perspective, this doesn't make sense, and we should do something completely different. I think that this is kind of a mindset that mid-level engineers need to develop, and also, further down the line, senior engineers. This is the way they think about it, especially at product companies. And I think that a lot of engineers who just do it for kind of for the fun of coding, they don't really understand the importance of meeting the business needs and not just having fun or doing the thing that you enjoy.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you've all heard of Gergely Orosz. He writes an amazing newsletter called oh God, here we go. The Pragmatic Programmer. There we go, got it. And he does excellent content, basically all about the business of programming and software engineering. And he talks about the product-minded engineer. And I think this is something that is really important. It came kind of naturally to me because I had a bit of a marketing background. So for me, I automatically I automatically think about like, who is our audience? Like, who is our user? What do they want? Like, what value are we providing? Blah, blah, blah. But it's something that, as you mentioned, a lot of people aren't thinking about. They just come in and they just see it as like, I'm a programmer, so I solve programming problems. But there comes up stuff comes up all the time. So I still get to code as part of my job. I feel very lucky that I get to do that. That was part of my negotiations for accepting my position, was that I still got to code. And part of what I do, for example, there was a button, right? It was like an upload for a form, and it had a button that like you would put your file in, and then you would click the upload button, and then you would submit the form. But actually, the way that the tech works for us is that the image shouldn't upload until someone submits the form. So I went back to our product manager and I said, hey, our product owner, and I said, hey, I've noticed that there's this button, this upload button inside the form, but actually the upload happens with the whole form submit. So what do we do with this button? Because as anyone who has worked with like Figma and UX designers, UI UX designers and product owners knows, usually you're kind of given, as a front-end developer, you're given a view of exactly what they want, and then it's your job to create it. But I knew that this button, like I was like, this button is not going to exist. Like we don't need this button. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't work with the tech. And I can imagine that a lot of juniors, they would have just kind of said to each other, oh, I don't get it, but let's just do it because it's our job to create the design. Same design that's in Figma, it's my job to create that. And whereas me as a I would consider myself still mid-level in terms of talent. That for me, I saw that and I immediately went, hang on, we have to talk to them about that because that's not going to work. And I didn't even bother creating the button because I knew, okay, after I talked to the product owner, they're probably going to say, okay, don't worry about the button. That's exactly what they said. But I knew if they said, no, I really want it that way, I could have done it later, right? But I knew how to prioritize my time and I knew who to talk to when I saw something that was inconsistent. When it came to naming files, for example, or naming downloads, I really spoke to our product owner and said, well, hang on, how are the users going to be using these files? What information do they want in the file names? Like, do they want an email address? Do they want a UUID? Do they want the like a name of what's in the file? Or like what information do they want here? The date that it was uploaded? Do you know what I mean? Because that hadn't been in the product specifications. So I had kind of gone out of my way to find that information. And I think that's something that, as you mentioned, Nadia, a lot of juniors, they're just thinking about the task. Like, what is my task? Okay, I do the task. That's my job done. But actually, you should also be kind of taking a critical eye to it. If you notice something that's out of place or you notice something that doesn't seem quite right, or you're thinking about your user and how your user would actually go about doing things, and you notice an inconsistency or something that seems awkward, then it's also totally within the scope of your job to bring that up with the product owner or the designer or whomever, or your team lead, depending on the structure of your company, and to say, hey, I noticed XYZ is here. I don't understand why that's there, or why are we putting that there? And usually asking those kinds of questions makes you seem more competent. Even if you're asking what is a silly question, people usually appreciate that you have taken the time and made the effort to ask and you really want to understand how things are working. So definitely take that technical curiosity and apply it to the product as a whole. And as you said, Nadia, to the business as a whole.
Definitely. We actually got a question in the meantime. So a question is from Dev Agrawal. As a mid-senior programmer, how do we help and encourage the juniors to learn more and develop the skills to become a mid-level? So that's actually a good question. From my side, I think that sharing knowledge is kind of the best way to encourage people to grow and develop. And organizing learning sessions at work, within your team, cross-functional, maybe some technical conferences within your job. Then I think sharing knowledge in various forms is something that is done. There are many ways to share knowledge. Code reviews is a good way to encourage people to learn more. Some people who have reviewed my code in the past, they actually dropped in links to various sources that I could learn from. Martin Fowler's blog was a popular one that I saw in some of my pull requests. Then also you can share articles with your team members about the things that you are learning. And I think that another thing that also is very inspiring coming from senior programmers is just sharing, being vulnerable with juniors and sharing things that you struggle with and also how you overcome your struggles if you're learning a new technical stack, for instance. I think that this is something that gives juniors more confidence and also helps them that it shows them that even though you're already a senior, you're still learning and you're still growing your skills. So this is something that came to mind. Maybe Anna, you would like to add something to that?
Yeah, I can't agree more. That's just like, it's such a good point, Nadia. Like, I think, so I gave a presentation, actually, a presentation I've given a few times, which is called How to Support Junior Developers. So like this, I feel like I'm here with you. And what Nadia said is really spot on. Try to understand that a lot of juniors, the reason that they're quiet or the reason they're not asking questions or the reason they're not admitting that they need help is because they're terrified that they will get fired, right? That someone will find out that they shouldn't have been hired in the first place. They totally fluked their technical test and they shouldn't be there. And they are absolutely convinced that they are going to be fired if someone finds out how little they know, right? Because I think if you can understand that mindset, it becomes a lot easier to understand what you as a senior or a mid-level person need to do, or a team lead for that matter, need to do to support them. And what Nadia said is spot on. I think the biggest thing is really to demonstrate what you expect them to do. So you say, like, if you hear someone in a meeting talking about, a cluster, let's say, and you know that the junior doesn't have any containerization experience, you should be the one to stop them and say, hey, sorry, I'm not sure that everyone here will actually understand what a cluster is. Do you mind explaining it? If you can do that and take a little bit of pressure off the junior to be constantly admitting everything they don't know, that can be very, very helpful. But of course, also for yourself, when you admit that you don't know something or you need help with something, that can go a long way as well. I think checking in is good. If you get through a meeting and you find that the junior in your team hasn't said anything or asked anything, or they haven't seemed to make progress with their ticket just generally after a daily or something, you can actually just drop them a line, be it a message or like a call, excuse me, and just say, hey, like I noticed you've been really quiet, or I noticed you haven't made much progress yet. Like, is there something I can help with? Because I know that XYZ topic could be a bit confusing. And then you do like a laughing emoji or something like that to kind of lighten the mood so it doesn't feel like there's a lot of pressure. So you basically try to keep things like light and supportive. And yeah, because I think, again, going back to advocating for them, I think when juniors, I've heard this a lot, that like juniors, they'll ask the first one or two times that they don't understand something. And then after a while, it just becomes like, it feels like they're stopping everyone every 5 seconds. And so they just give up, right? So you as a mid-level to a senior developer, it's also great if you can notice that this is happening. Oh, they asked a question about Docker, but now we're talking about Kubernetes. They're obviously not going to understand Kubernetes if they don't understand Docker. So like you need to take that moment to say, hey, everyone, I think maybe this has gotten like a little bit too advanced. Like, let's take it back a few steps. Or you can say something like, I think this might be off topic for the rest of the conversation. Or you say, hey, everyone, let's like, I wouldn't mind if we do at least a basic overview with our juniors about what Kubernetes is before we go into more details on this. Can we talk about it more tomorrow? Or something like that. And then you go out of your way to offer that kind of training, to say like a Kubernetes 101 kind of session for the junior or juniors in your team, then that also shows that you are aware of what they're expected to know. You're giving them permission not to know something. And I think that's what's really important for juniors, that they're constantly scared that if they don't know something, it's the end of their job. So if you can give them an out and say like, I don't expect you to know this. Can I help you? Like, that's much more powerful than just trying to push them to ask more questions. So yeah, that's what I would say. I totally agree with Nadia, but yeah, just some practical tips there, I guess, for what I would want to see. If you're a team lead, the best thing you can do is have regular one-on-ones with your juniors. And if you want to have a random meeting with a junior, please tell them in advance that it's not to fire them. Like say, hey, can we have a quick chat because I found an opportunity for you to speak at a local event I think you might like, or something like that. Don't just be like, hey, can we chat or can we talk? It's urgent. Oh my God, like you will give them a heart attack. So just like try to manage expectations.
Yeah, definitely. We actually got a request to ask a question from Daniel. Would you like to ask your question now?
Hi, Anna, and hi, Nadia. I'm a junior programmer, and I was working at this company for the past 3 years, and I've helped them create a few systems here and there, start a fleet management system. I've done marketing. I've done quite a few things for them. But in all those cases, I've had a senior that takes the credit for my work. Um, so basically, I kept taking on more responsibility, but kept getting the same pay and kept the same title for the past 3 years. I quit my job last week, and I'm currently searching for a new job. So I need some tips on how I can avoid going through the same thing at my new job.
I'm happy to jump in on that one.
Sure.
So I'd be really interested to know what steps you took from your side. I'm not trying to blame you or anything, but I just want to understand like what did you tell them that you wanted to do, or what did you tell them that you had done? Do you know what I mean? Like how did you advocate for yourself in those scenarios, or did you like just get a bit overwhelmed and kind of think, oh shit, I'm just a junior, I can't say anything. Like what were your actions in this scenario?
Um, I'd say I'm to blame as well because I'm a little timid when it comes to talking about things like this. But every time I did a project, I would come up to them and tell them, I can do this. I've managed to do this. So that warrants a little more pay or a different position. So yeah, they wouldn't really take me very seriously after that. But every time I go
Yeah.
to every time I'd go to HR, they'll brush it off because my senior hasn't said anything about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, and so like when you spoke to the senior about it, like were they happy to back you up, or were they just more like whatever, kind of in their own world? What was their approach to it?
Um, well, the workplace was kind of toxic. He takes credit for all the work.
Oh,
So,
fun. Yeah, that sounds like a fun guy to work with. Yeah, okay. So yeah, I mean, for one thing, toxic workplaces exist. So I gave you a little pause before because I think it's good to get out of them. Um, as said, startups are like they're a whole other world, man. Like I think with startups, they're kind of, for one thing, they're always very hesitant to give promotions and give pay raises because often they're very tight on money. But I think, as you said, like you went to HR and they kind of brushed you off because you didn't have the support of your senior. I think that's where, to me, like the impact of the team has to come into play. And I mean, I have to say as well, there is a chance that no matter what you did, they wouldn't give you a promotion because they just didn't want to. Like that's possible. But I would say, again, going back to my advice from earlier, that getting getting references from other people in your team, like if not the senior, then talk to anyone you interacted with, like anyone you worked with to get this shit done. Like get them to give you one or two sentences at least about how well you did. Um, it can be hard when you're doing a lot of different tasks, but I think it's really important, as said, to kind of keep a log of all the stuff that you've done. So when applying to new jobs, which I think was your question, again, the same kind of principle applies. Like go back through, like have a think back through the 3 years you were there and kind of think, okay, what were some of my major achievements? Do I have anything measurable? In my book, I talk about the NNQ system, which is called the names, numbers, quotes. So you want to get names of people who you worked with or who you know at the company that you're applying to. So even if that's the recruiter or someone on their dev team who you just message on LinkedIn, it doesn't matter. Just drop names, as many names as you can. And numbers, that's like how you impacted your previous work. So if you mentioned marketing, I produced a newsletter that went out to 100,000 readers, or I implemented 20 tickets in my first month on the job, whatever it is. Like, I don't know, but just have a think about like what numbers you can drop in there. And quotes is, as I said, references from people. One of the most undervalued or underestimated, I should say, things on LinkedIn is the references section. So I would go back through, think about anyone at your company as you said, it was a toxic place, so probably you don't want to contact too many people, but hopefully you had like 1 or 2 people who you really clicked with. And I would go back to them and say, hey, would you be willing to give me a written reference that I can use on LinkedIn, and I'll give you one back, and just do a quid pro quo, because recruiters really do read those references. And your LinkedIn should also use that NNQ system, by the way. So you should also be putting those kind of numbers, quotes, etc., listing off all the cool stuff you did, anything you did that is outside your normal responsibilities, should be on your LinkedIn as well. So I would say focus on that kind of stuff, because a lot of people can apply for jobs, but it's really hard for people not to give you a mid-level position if you can say, hey, I've done 3 years with these technologies, and look at all these people who say that I'm great to work with. That's very powerful. So I would say just go back to basics, like references work. Yeah, so that would be what I would say. How about you, Nadia?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for this detailed answer. I think that in certain cases, if the company is toxic and if your coworkers are taking credit for your work, it would be very difficult to actually prove that you have done it if somebody is claiming that they have done it. But then, the question that I would ask myself is whether I really want to keep working in a company where my achievements and my work isn't really being recognized for what it is. I know that a lot of people have trouble taking credit for their own work, and a lot of people fall down this path. And I've seen that women like to do this, saying that we have done it, when actually you should have said that I have done it. So this stuff is difficult, especially if you're facing this pushback from your boss, who is actually not kind of helping you get promoted, and kind of not recognizing your achievements at a job. So and I guess another tip that I might share with you, Daniel, for kind of how not to be in this kind of situation again, and how not to make the case of getting into a toxic company again, because I think that this is one part of the question that you asked. I think that it's difficult to really understand what the company is before you join it. But I think that there are red flags that you can kind of pick up on before you join. So some things that come to mind for me is a company that is toxic. They might have a very kind of disorganized interview process. They might be unwilling to answer questions, especially if you're interviewing somewhere and you ask them explicitly, what is your career ladder process looks like, what is the promotion structure at your company, for instance. And if they say that they don't want to talk about it, they don't like to share this information, for me, this is personally a red flag. When they are not clear, if you ask them like, okay, so I'm joining you as a junior, for instance, or a mid-level, what will it take for me to get promoted? And they say, oh, this is like too early to talk about it. This is like confidential, or maybe like we don't have a process. So this is a red flag, I think, if there is no process. So you want to join a company that really has a process around promotions. I think also before joining a company, what is also good is actually to get to talk to a couple of engineers that will be your future colleagues, and try to gain their opinion on their workplace. I know that also people, they don't feel comfortable really like saying everything they think about their job to kind of somebody who they just met. But I think that you can pick up on some signals as well. Maybe you can ask them like what the career promotion process looks like for them, how often it happens, and in general, how difficult it is to get promoted at the company. If your focus is on growing your career vertically from this point on, I think that this is something that is crucial to you right now. So I think that you should focus on that as well, and ask as many questions as you can, and see how people are feeling about it. Because sometimes people won't share something explicitly, but you might get a signal from them. For instance, they might say, okay, I've spent like 5 years here and I'm still mid-level. So then this is a question like, do you want to join this company or not? And there can be like another opposite spectrum of this. If somebody is, only has like 2 years of experience, but is already a senior, then this is also a question whether this is kind of aligned with your goals or not. Hope this is helpful, and I really wish you all the best with your search right now.
I just want to also just pitch in for a second that One of the things Nadia said can actually combine with one of the things I said, which I think is really great. So as she said, if you can talk to someone who's on their team, like ideally the team you're joining, but even just in the company that you're joining, and you can use LinkedIn for this. This is something again that I recommend in my book, is that actually you can cold message people on LinkedIn and say, hey, I see that you work at XYZ company. I'm thinking of applying there, but I really want to know if it's going to be a good fit for me. I had this bad experience at my last job, and I'm just trying to avoid somewhere where promotions never happen. Can you tell me a bit about what the promotion process is like at your company? And they can talk to you about it, blah, blah, blah. And if they say nice things, then this is the perfect, like, let's say her name's Jane Doe and she tells you really great stuff about working as a developer at that company, then you can then go to the recruiter in your cover letter and say, hey, I had this great conversation with one of your engineers, Jane Doe, and she told me how great your company is at blah, blah, blah. That's why like I thought it was important for me to apply to a job there, and that way you're kind of like you're name dropping, but you're also getting the information you need to find out if it's a good company. So I think, yeah, I hope that helps, but I totally agree with everything Nadia said. Great advice.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for sharing your story. I know that it must have been pretty difficult to share something publicly, so we really appreciate you being vulnerable here. And I hope that this advice was useful and actionable, and best of luck. We have some more questions on Twitter. So Anna, would you like us to tackle them, or should we start wrapping up?
Yeah, let's take one last one. So again, for anyone just joining, I'm kind of fighting off a sinus infection, so I'm trying, but I can't keep talking for too long. So let's take one last question, and then I'll probably head off.
Yeah, sure. So the question that I saw was this from NASA. What can we do about this? Most times companies don't want to hire a fresh entry programmer. So, and probably you have more experience with hiring than I do. Maybe you would like to share your perspective. Is there anything that we can do about this?
Sorry, I'm not quite sure I understood the question. Can you say it again? Like, what was the question?
Sure. So what can we do about this? Most companies don't want to hire a fresh entry programmer.
Oh, so okay. So the question is about like hiring a junior, and like they don't want to hire like someone fresh out of uni or whatever, or even fresh out of a boot camp or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I've written a whole book on this, so I feel like I could say approximately 68,000 words on this topic, which is the length of my book. So I'll try to like keep it short. But I think the best thing you can do if you're facing, okay, so for one thing, there's not much you can do about what kind of engineer a company wants to hire, right? Like, I mean, that's the kind of thing that's my job as a director, like to check who we're hiring and who's available and seeing whether they match, right? That's not the job for applicants, unfortunately. But I think the best thing you can do is to prove that you are ready for the jobs that are out there. And the best way you can do that outside of like, let's say you've got all the technical skills you need, right? So let's say that's not even in question. Like you're like, yep, I've got the tech skills, that's great, but I'm not getting interviews, for example, because people don't want to hire someone fresh out of uni or fresh out of a boot camp. All right. Well, then probably the problem is that you're not showing that experience in other ways. So, for example, you might have a GitHub profile that shows this amazing code, but no one's going to look at that GitHub profile unless you give them a reason to. So the best way you can do that is to show knowledge through other people, through community, and through things like blog posts and social media. So if you, for example, know a lot about a particular topic or you're particularly passionate about a topic, then you should be writing blog posts. You should then be going on LinkedIn and you should be linking those blog posts and talking about what you wrote about and why it's important to programming. That engages other people can read it, other people can comment, you start forming a network. But the best thing you can do, and this is a question back when I was doing interviews for teams, one of the questions we would always ask a junior or a working student or someone who has wanted to be an intern was always like, have you only coded by yourself or have you coded in a team? Because a lot of people, they don't understand there is a strong difference. And I'll tell you what, like when you're a junior and you haven't worked in a company before, the first time you see a real working code base, you are going to be blown away by how complex it seems, right? Because it is just on a completely different level to any project that you've done by yourself, with no other collaborators. So how do you get more experience coding in teams? Well, the obvious one are hackathons. As someone who has a toddler, hackathons are completely impractical for me. I have never participated in one outside of my own companies. And so I always like to put kind of a little asterisk on that and say, like, if you can do hackathons, go and do them. They are always great, especially for beginners, so that you can say that you've worked in a team. You can say that you've coded in a team. You can join a bunch of online communities. Lots of places have communities where you can look for a pair programmer, so you can actually work in pairs with someone on a project of yours or a project of theirs. That's another way to do it. I would say open source is an incredibly strong way. If you can start contributing to open source projects, then that shows a lot of initiative and it also shows a lot of drive, and it's something that you can prove on paper. Tutoring other people, mentoring other people, just basically, as I said, creating this proof. And in my book, I call this social proof. Um, Basically, you have the technical skills, but someone who just receives your CV, like every CV, let's say they're advertising for a junior Java backend developer or something. Every single CV they receive is going to say that that person can do Java, right? So why should they trust you when you say you can do Java over some other person who says they can do Java, right? There's no clear or obvious way or any obvious reason why they would choose you over that other person, right? So what you need to do is create a body of evidence that is undeniable. You create blog posts that you can link to, or YouTube videos if you prefer videos, if you prefer speaking to writing. You create communities that you can mention, or meetups that you can go to. Look for meetups in your area. Get people to help you on code with that, or like just go to talks and meet people. And then you can get references from people. Go to hackathons and participate. Show something, like make sure that your projects are awesome, but like you should have 1 to 2 amazing projects that you can use as examples of your work. The bigger and cleaner and more beautiful, the better, rather than having like 15 teeny tiny projects. And all of this stuff should be documented in some way, as I said, either through LinkedIn or Twitter or blog posts, something like that, where you can actually point people to it and say, hey, look at this stuff that I know. Look at this stuff that I do. Look at these people who all say that I'm great. Like, because if you can provide all that kind of stuff, then you can write an amazing cover letter or an amazing CV, and you will stand out because a lot of people don't do this stuff. So if you can take these kind of minimum steps to display that you don't just know the stuff, but you can prove that you know the stuff even before your technical interview, then that helps a lot in standing out. But yeah, bigger picture, there's not much you can do. If a company doesn't want to hire a junior, they don't want to hire a junior. That said, again, networking is your friend here. Like going to these meetups and hackathons, it's not just about creating a great CV. It's also about getting to know other developers in your area, because sometimes if someone gets to know you and they think that you're really great, sometimes they will just find a way to hire you. It can be really weird. I haven't seen it happen in my companies, but I've heard about it enough that I know that it happens, where someone just gets to know you and they see your work and they're like, oh, wow, this person's really good. Like, I know on paper they don't look that great, but you should see the code there, right? Or you should see how they talk about Java or whatever it is. They are awesome. Like, when they would fit right in, and they will find a way to hire that person. So I know it sucks for people who don't feel particularly confident in social settings, but I really do think my life motto is say yes and show up. So if you can say yes to opportunities, say yes to meetups, say yes to hackathons, say yes to being active in your community, say yes to blogging, and then actually do it, show up, be there, meet people, even if you just talk to one person at every event you go to, that alone will already get you so far. So yeah, obviously, again, I have a whole book on this topic, so I'm not going to be able to sum it all up here. But that would be my main advice. That's the main thing that I see junior applicants missing, is the ability to sell their technical abilities.
Yeah, I agree. Great answer. Thank you so much for sharing. I would agree. I would add to that having a social presence is something that can make you stand out of the crowd when you're applying for a job as a junior developer, because the stuff is hard, and kind of getting your first job is the hardest job. That it's the hardest moment in your career, because afterwards it does become easier, and the next job will be much easier to find than the first one. We are out of time for today. Thank you everybody for joining in. Thank you, Anna, so much for co-hosting this space with me. I think we all learned quite a lot today from each other. And thank you so much.
Oh, okay, it's on. Thank you. I was kept trying to unmute myself and it wouldn't unmute. I was like, come on. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Nadia. Thank you, everyone who came along. Obviously, follow us both and buy both of our books because they're both amazing. And yeah, just let us know how you're going. Feel free to ask questions after the space as well. And yeah, just best of luck to all of you. Keep going, keep networking, keep getting to know each other. Follow some other people who are in this space and maybe see what they're about. If you've got similar interests, then you can also chat to them. I'm sure that might be a great way to start doing your networking. And yeah, huge thank you to Nadia, who, as I mentioned at the beginning, did most of the legwork and the organizational work in getting this space up and running. I'm just the sick author who kind of like stumbled in and tried to croak her way through it. So thank you so much, Nadia.
Thank you so much.
I've wanted to do stuff with Nadia for so long. So yeah, I'm just so happy that we could make this happen, and hopefully not for the last time. I hope we get to do something again soon because yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, me too. I hope we will do something together. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.